juggling between the chat, and hopefully I can see what your day in color looks like. What is your day in color looks like? Is it possibly green? Is it yellow, orange? There's many colors that everyone has shown. And so thank you again this morning. And I am again so thankful for you joining us. Let me ask you another question. How are you feeling today? Kay had started us out by doing some exercising, making us feel better, energized in order for us to just start this conference. And I don't know about you, I was doing the exercises as I was sitting in my chair. And so it gave us an opportunity just to start out our day and just to be energetic, to open up our minds and our spirits, just to start the day off. And so as we begin our session, before we get started, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor for this session, Essential Health, for being grateful for supporting us in helping us make this event possible. Without our sponsors, that would always be, I mean, kind of difficult. But you know what? We thank you for all of our sponsors, Central Health. Now, let me give you a few housekeeping agendas or things that we need to go over today. This is a safe and supportive place. Please help us remain or to maintain a respectful and inclusive environment. We all want to ensure that you participate in all of the sessions. And so let's make this as a safe and supportive space. Please remember to mute yourself at all times. Remember that we're live on Facebook. If you are on Facebook or if you can get on your phones, just share it with your group, share it with your family, because we're trying to go across the nation. Would you believe that we're across the nation about right now? People are all over the place. Please use your chat function in Hoover to interact with other attendees. For questions for the presenter, use the Q&A function in Hoover. We finally understand the word, can pronounce the word Hoover. If you feel overwhelmed or need to talk to someone during the session, please call 512-472 4357. Let me repeat that again, 512-472 4357. Press 1, then 1 again for immediate emotional support. Between the sessions, you can visit our comfort suite where we can provide a safe haven. You'll find the comfort suite in community under the main navigation in Hoover, in the community under the main navigation in Hoover. We will also have a number of surveys. If you registered for the continuing education credits or CEUs, please check the chat for links. The first link, you'll sign in for your CEU, but please sign in at the beginning of your session. After the workshop, there will be another link for CEU evaluations. This is so very important. Please check on that link for a short evaluation, which also includes the CEU request form. And once you've completed the evaluation, you will be taken to a page with a link in your CEU certificate. We'll also post a link for the workshop evaluation in chat. It's so important for us to have those evaluation because it helps us to improve year after year because we want to ensure that our attendees and those who participate are fully involved so we can continue to prepare for the upcoming year. Also, if you need to let us know that we have some great conference merchandise, let me just say, we need to let you know that we have some great conference merchandise. So be sure to check out our online store at the ctaafsc.com/shop. We have plenty of t-shirts and hats and all of those different things. So get some of those conference merchandise. Now, I would like for you to join me and to join us for our presenter, Kay Hutchinson. I believe that you all remember Kay at the very beginning, a sweet spirit. Kay is the CEO of and the founder of Aiki Healing. I hope I pronounced that right. She has over 17 years of clinical practice in Chinese energy medicine. Kay helps her clients break through the five most limited blocks in vibrant health, emotional, and mental clarity and prosperity in an 8-minute reset tools that are easy to use and based over 2,000 years old framework of working with five core energy tanks through the system of the five element healing. Kay finds that when people understand the framework of their energy tanks and how these tanks can empower or deplete them across the body, mind, and spiritual level, they are empowered to regulate and clear the stubborn blocks in the most important areas of our lives. Now, I just want to thank again you for being here at this session. I would like for you just to enjoy the presentation, and we'll be back together soon for live question and answer. Thank you again, Kay Hutchinson.
Welcome, everybody, to the Central Texas African American Family Support Conference. I'm Kay Hutchinson, and I'm so excited to be with you this year in this virtual format, whether you're tuning in live or you're tuning in through the replay. And I just kind of wanted to test and see where everybody is right now. Where are you coming from? If you wouldn't mind putting that in the chat. And as you do that, I'm going to slide us over to the screen share. If you see me looking over that way, it's because that's where my monitor is. So, oh, I see some people coming in from, wow, all kinds of different areas. That's really exciting. I want to give a quick shout out to Integral Care, the critical sponsor that makes this conference possible year after year. I'm personally grateful to be able to see such a wide variety of resources being shared with us as African Americans, and Integral Care plays such a pivotal role in bringing this presentation and other sessions through this conference to you this year in 2021. So you have come into the segment called Holistic Strategies for Depression and Other Mood Disorders. And I am Kay Hutchinson, your host for this segment. And who am I? Most people know me as a holistic practitioner that has been in practice for over 17 years with Chinese energy medicine. So kind of think of that as acupuncture, but without the needles. And also as a master herbalist, people are aware of my work. I am the owner of Aiki Healing Clinic and School and the creator of Blockbuster Life, the 12-week online training program that helps clients to clear their most 5 limiting blocks around health and vitality, around mental clarity and emotional stability, and around their ability to create income and revenue streams through their businesses. In addition, I'm also the author of 5 Elements Healing, a practical guide for reclaiming your essential power. A guide that walks you through the 5 different areas in your lives that tend to get stuck, that affect your body, mind, and spirit. So those are the things that most people think about when they think about Aiki Healing, when they think about Kay Hutchinson. And although I have this expertise as a holistic practitioner, what brings me before you today is really my own personal experience that I've had with depression. And that's the piece that most people don't know. So I'm going to take this off of screen share for just a second because I want to talk to you more intimately. I've had 3 different episodes with clinical depression that were debilitating and really profoundly impactful in my life. And by the time we finish this workshop, you will have heard about all 3. And my hope with sharing that is for you to hear some of the strategies that help to move me through, so that hopefully those strategies can help you or those that you know that may be suffering from depression. In incident 1, I was an adolescent when I first experienced depression. And I'm someone that was raised between 2 cultures and 2 countries. My father was African American and he was in the US Army. And so he was one of the soldiers that was deployed to Vietnam. So we as a family spent a lot of time on army posts in Okinawa, Japan. And my mother is Japanese. She's from the Osaka area of Japan. So differently when we were in Asia, and those experiences shaped a lot of my understanding of mindfulness and meditation. Now, when we would come stateside, we would come back to East Side, Austin, Texas, and I would be surrounded by my aunts, my uncles, and my big mama, big daddy, my grandparents who lived off of East 8th Street. And so I had this cultural experience of seeing and experiencing racism from different lenses through different cultures. And I was always a joyful child, a very introspective child, but one that was really light in energy and able to connect in with the positive things in life until my years as a teenager. As a teenager, I started to notice this sensation of grayness just covering me, the feeling like the sun wasn't shining anymore. And at first I thought, oh, well, everybody says it's because I'm a teenager, I'm going through adolescence, and my parents thought that too in the beginning. But it kept going on, and it began to impact my grades. Where I was once a straight A student, suddenly I was struggling more. Now, part of that had to come from, or part of that had to do with the fact that I was first group of students that was bused from my culturally rich neighborhood into an all-white school, where there wasn't a lot of acceptance and there wasn't a lot of support and nourishment from the staff as educators towards those of us of color, So some of that grade drop was as a result of that. But another piece was just that I was really in the throes of a deep depression. And when you're deeply depressed, it's really hard to process cognitive information. It's really hard to find that motivation to keep up with your studies and do what's necessary to succeed. Well, the one thing that did give me great joy as a teenager was actually learning on my own. I used to love to research different things, and I had the book called Silent Spring by Rachel Carson, where she talked a lot about how many toxins were in our environment and how this was starting to impact people on a health level. At the same time, I was listening to a lot of Marvin Gaye, and I would just loop What's Going On. That was my favorite song back in the day. And he mentions in that song, fish filled with mercury. So the kid in me started going, wait, Marvin's talking about all the fish filled with mercury. Why was Marvin talking about that? This lady over here, this researcher, is talking about mercury and heavy metals and pesticides and how these things affect the human body. And so although I was getting help, parents were taking me to Western physicians, Army doctors that were giving me medications, and I was getting counseling, I wasn't seeing a huge shift in my depression. And so I started to say, well, what if I cleaned out a lot of these toxins that they're talking about could be harmful? And I went on an organic diet, which at that time was hard to come by because you couldn't find organic foods everywhere. This is back in the mid-'70s. Who even heard of organic back then? And started looking at how there were so many toxins in the materials and lotions and cosmetics that I was using as a young teenager. And then how many toxins there were in just the typical house cleaning products that my grandparents were using, that my parents were using. And I noticed when they used these products, I would have deeper valleys in my depression. So I went on a mission with my parents' help to kind of clear all this stuff out of my life. And as we worked on this for a 6 to 8 month period. I felt like that Johnny Nash song, I can see clearly now, because the sun began to suddenly shine again. The clouds begin to lift, that heavy sense of depression and that sense of not wanting to be on the planet at times began to dissolve. And so through that first incident with depression, I learned the importance of looking at toxins in my environment and in the things that I was engaging, and making that choice to clear the toxins as a way of healing and getting better. And so I was able then to go forward and pursue a college education and move on in my life. Okay, so those are some things that you may want to be thinking about, is how many toxins am I taking in? Start looking at your labels. Start noticing if your products that you're using have this really long list of ingredients with things you can't pronounce and don't even know what they are. Chances are they may be playing a role in keeping that depression locked in, and also preventing pharmaceutical drugs, preventing counseling and other traditional therapies from really working. And if you were like me, you were finding, hey, I'm doing all the right things, but they're just not effective. And it was because there were so many toxins in my body. Okay, so let me get back into our screen share here, now that you know a little bit more about me. And we're going to kind of visit here what the different objectives are for today's experience, so you kind of have a roadmap of where we're going. So by the time we finish this workshop, you will be able to perform 3 energetic reset exercises that have been shown clinically in our work as holistic practitioners to begin to reduce the sensation of depression and begin to bring some movement and healing to depression. You're also going to learn how to use aromatherapy as a healing tool for depression. You're going to also be able to describe 3 different healing foods that can help with depression, and also describe and hopefully make a commitment to decreasing the one food that is really hurting your ability or a loved one's ability to heal depression and make strides out of that depression. It's a food that we all really need to be conscious of as African Americans. So let's kind of get started here with kind of checking into what you may believe about depression. So we're going to do a little truth or false here, and I want you to put your answers in the chat box. So what do we already know? The most effective way to clinically treat depression is with pharmaceutical drugs and counseling. True or false? Agree or disagree? Put that in the box there. Okay, here's the next one. Breathwork, yoga, and exercises like Tai Chi do not have any sort of scientific backing that shows that they improve brain chemistry and moods. True or false? Agree or disagree? The next one is aromatherapy can help make a room smell pleasant, but doesn't really have an impact on biochemistry that impacts moods. True or false? And that one I kind of gave away in the objectives already. Last one, depression impacts our mental states and our bodies. True or false? Agree or disagree? All right, ready to hear the answers? Okay, here we go. So let me back up just a little bit. I've gotten ahead of myself. The best way to clinically treat depression is with pharmaceutical drugs and counseling. The answer to that is false. There are numerous studies from the National Libraries of Medicine that show that an integrative and holistic approach can complement those traditional therapies. You heard my journey where I was partaking of those traditional therapies, but until I started integrating holistic ways of detoxifying my body and getting toxins out, and really even looking at the role of toxins, I really did not see my depression shifting. So I happen to be one of the practitioners that really specializes in helping clients to say, okay, let's develop a holistic plan that helps to complement and help you get the most out of your work with doctors or psychiatrists or psychotherapy. Okay, the second one, breathwork, yoga, and exercises like Tai Chi do not have any sort of scientific data to show that they're effective for mood disorders. Again, that's false. I'm so happy that researchers are actually creating studies that really specifically document the effectiveness of Tai Chi and yoga and breathwork. And in a recent 2017 study, there was this group of people that engaged Tai Chi in energetic movement form for 3 whole months. And what researchers did is they used a scale to measure the level of depression that these particular participants had. And then they did this 3 months of Tai Chi, and then they looked at where they were at the end. They did the same thing with a control group where they did not use Tai Chi. And what they found is that the group that did Tai Chi had a significant improvement in their depression levels. So we're starting to see more and more studies that support the use of holistic tools in our journeys with depression. So I'm going to take a little break here and come back out of the screen share and tell you about incident number 2. So incident number 2 in my life, you know, I got through that first bout of depression, was able to get back into school, was going to UT, was crushing it. I had a 4.0 GPA. I was loving that my academics had returned to their fullness. And I was in my early 20s, 22, somewhere around there, just about ready to finish with UT, when there on campus were individuals that were spraying, and they had hazmat suits on for these worms that were invading all of the trees. Now, for 99.9% of the people, that chemical probably was harmless. But to me, since I had chemical sensitivities, it absolutely made me very, very ill. And within a week of being exposed to that chemical, I started to drop weight. I started to have difficulties with digesting foods. Definitely my mood began to slide back into that area of depression. Little did I know that all along in my life, even when I was a teenager, that I had a condition called fibromyalgia, which predisposed me to chemical hypersensitivities, so that the things that wouldn't normally make another person sick would make me sick. I didn't know that at the time. And I began to once again consult with Western doctors, and they put me on different types of medications, but they could never say exactly why I was so sick. I also engaged with counseling and made sure that I had support in that area. But still, I continued to get sicker and sicker until I was about 80 pounds, and I was barely able to get out of bed. Once again, that thing that always brought me joy was learning and researching, and I began learning and researching about Chinese energy medicine. I would pray to the Lord, okay, what do you want to, how should I spend my day? You know, when I'm so sick, guide me in what you want me to focus on. And I kept getting all of this kind of information about Chinese energy medicine and acupuncture. So I went to see Doctors Paul and Lisa Lin, who at the time were pioneers in the field of Chinese medicine, because they were the ones who worked with the Texas legislature to make it legal to practice acupuncture. Before then, you could get thrown into jail for practicing acupuncture and herbal medicine. And they later formed one of the first colleges of acupuncture here in the state of Texas, which was later sold to UT. But in that journey, I learned that there are things called energy pathways or meridians in our bodies, and when the energy is not flowing right with those pathways, it can block our ability to really absorb even pharmaceutical drugs, and it can block our ability to self-heal. And so I learned that concept from them at that age, and slowly, over a 3-year period, I was able to recover my health fully enough to go back to UT, finish my degree, and move forward with my career as an educator. And later, when you hear about the third incident, you'll find out why I switched from education and became a holistic practitioner. So our energy pathways and how we are regulating ourselves on an energy level has everything to do with how healthy we are physically and with our moods emotionally, and how we are then able to utilize and weave together a body-mind-spirit approach to really self-heal. So let's go back into our screen share here. you a little bit using the framework of energy takes. You just heard me mention energy. So in a nutshell, we have 5 different major areas or energy takes that when we keep those areas well regulated, we find that we have greater health and vitality. At age 57 now, I actually have more energy and physical vibrancy than I did when I was 20 or 22, that I did when I was in my 30s. And I achieved that by being very aware of where my energy is in those 5 tanks. And working with these 5 tanks can also help us to cultivate the ability to process emotions instead of those emotions getting stuck and playing a role in creating or keeping us in states of depression. Through this workshop, we're going to work with 2 of those 5 elemental energy tanks, and you can see them in this little bubble here. We have a wood tank, a fire tank, an earth tank, a metal tank, and a water tank. Now the metal tank, and the reason that I'm wearing silver, is to help remind you that our metal tank is all about sadness, grief, and disappointment. It plays such a role in the creation of and the maintenance of depression in our lives. So we're going to work with that tank with some quick energy resets, but we're also going to work with the wood tank, which has to do with our nervous system, and it has to do with how we are responding through our nervous system and through stressful reactions to our environment and how that plays a role in depression. So how are we going to do this? We're going to do this experientially. Yes, I'm going to get you up and moving. We're going to go into our first reset, which is a movement reset. We're going to move our body. We're going to awaken our pathways to clear out sadness, grief, and disappointment. So let me get out of our screen share. And you can do this seated. You can stay in your chair, or if you are in a place where you can stand, you can join me standing. So I'm going to just get back right back here. So one of the things that we're going to be working on is to release that sadness and grief through a pathway that we know in Chinese energetic medicine is correlated with depression. So stand with your feet shoulder width apart. If you're sitting, make sure your feet are flat on the ground. You may need to scoot to the edge of your chair. And we're just going to be patting on the chest and brushing down and pulling out from our thumb. Patting on the chest and brushing down and pulling down. You're breathing through your nostrils. Squeeze the buttocks slightly as we inhale and exhale. Inhale and exhale. One more time. Inhale and exhale. Good. So that's the breath. That's the structure. Now we're going to add in an intention. We're going to be imagining that as we're tapping, all of those deeper feelings of sadness, grief, and loss are coming up, and then we're going to brush them out. All right, let's go. Inhale and brush out sadness. Inhale and exhale out grief. Inhale and brush out sadness. Inhale, let go of loss. Inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. Inhale, release. Inhale, let go. Inhale, release the sadness. Inhale, release the loss. Inhale, release. Inhale, and release. Beautiful. Shake that out. And just drop in the chat box what that was like for you. Anytime the feelings of sadness, grief, and loss come up and those feelings are really strong, you can use that tool to begin releasing and diminishing slowly the feelings of sadness, disappointment, and grief, because we're really working with the energy of those feelings that may be stuck traditionally in the lungs, and we're using our exhales to really let it go. Think about that for a moment. When you're really deep in grief, do you ever find, man, I can barely take that breath? We know from Chinese energy medicine that those feelings can get stuck in our lungs at times. Okay, yeah, let me know in the chat here how that was for you. We're going to get back into our screen share, and we're going to start talking about aromatherapy now. So essential oils are the essence the very core of plants. I'm a master herbalist, so I tend to really love working with essential oils. But what's really exciting to me these days is that they've done a lot of research on the effectiveness of one particular oil as it relates to depression, lavender. Now, the research that exists says that lavender activates oxytocin neurons in the PVN of the hypothalamus. What does that mean? Blah, 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 right? So oxytocin is a neurotransmitter. It's a type of chemical within our body that's a feel-good chemical. When you look over at someone that you love and you feel that feel-good feeling, that's oxytocin happening, right? When a woman goes through a really hard and prolonged labor and that baby finally comes into the world and she's holding that baby and she looks at that baby and she just feels utter joy, that is oxytocin that's making her feel that way. So what they're basically saying is that lavender activates that oxytocin, and it activates it in a portion of our brain that has to do with our automatic or autonomic responses. Now, a lot of times we are having responses to our environment, stressful responses, that we're not even registering consciously that's happening. That's called an autonomic response. And so imagine if there are things that are creating negative autonomic responses. Imagine for a moment if we have a tool that's actually going to activate a positive autonomic response. And they're finding on a research level, that's what lavender does for us, right? So I'm going to come out of our screen share for just a moment. So one of the things that you can do with lavender, other than diffusing it, put it in the little diffuser and let it get into the air, is you can actually use lavender on specific points on your body, acupressure points that will actually be absorbed through your skin, and that can also help at an even deeper level to activate that oxytocin. So where are the places that you can use lavender? One of the places is right immediately under the right rib cage. So if you get a little bit of lavender in your fingers, you can rub it into this area right underneath the right rib cage. And in Chinese medicine, we often say that depression is partially caused by stagnation, the energy of the liver holding and stagnating. Right? And usually that liver, that wood element, is stagnating anger, frustration, and irritation. And so when we begin to put that lavender in that area of the body, it begins to free up that area of the body. So the one thing I want you to be able to take away from this workshop today is, hey, there's a healing benefit to lavender, and I can either diffuse it in the air or I can put it in that power point right underneath my right rib cage. Now, if you tend to have kind of sensitive skin, you may want to put that lavender maybe in a little bit of coconut oil or a little bit of shea butter, kind of to dilute it instead of using it directly on the skin. And there are some other areas too that we can use them, which I go into more in my book, but also in the question and answer segment. If you have questions about that, you can ask me and I'm happy to share more. So we're going to move on to the next reset, which has to do with what? Our livers. So come back up if you can. Move to the edge of your chair if you are seated. And we're going to work with that area right here. So if you had lavender, you could put it on there and then do this particular movement for extra power. We're going to work to kind of release this area. This wood element tank that I talked about has to do with our nervous system, with our livers, our gallbladders, and all of these things play a role when they're imbalanced with depression. So what are we going to do with this? We're going to do some light drumming. So just come in and start drumming right underneath your right rib cage. Begin breathing deeply through your nostrils. Imagine the anger and irritation that may exist within yourself. And as you begin to drum, imagine that that energy is coming up and out. And we're going to do a little bit of a breathing exercise here with an inhale, exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. 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 Good. Now imagine anger, frustration, stuck energy coming out of your body as you rush out from this region of your body. Rush out. Release any stuck energies and feelings around anger, irritation, frustration, and other areas of feelings might also be stuck. So whatever is coming up for you, just allow it to move out. Beautiful. Now let's calm the energy down. Sometimes this exercise can stir you up, so we're just going to take an inhale here and imagine just energy floating back down to the ground. Beautiful. Inhaling into your highest healing source, and exhale, let energies move back downward towards the ground. Last time, inhale, and then exhale. Ooh. And when you do this particular reset with some lavender in the air or in your hands, you'll definitely begin to feel some changes. So let me know in the chat box here how that was for you. What did you experience? And again, if you have questions about that, remember we're going to have our Q&A. So I'm going to come back into our screen share here and kind of jump forward a little bit in my slides. And we're going to move into talking about food as medicine. So again, there's the traditional Western nutritional way of looking at foods in terms of their nutritional components. In Chinese energetic medicine, we look at the energy of foods in terms of how they're impacting that metal tank, which can hold sadness, grief, and depression. And we also look at how foods may be impacting that wood element tank, our nervous system, and the fact that sometimes we are repressing or holding in anger, irritation, and frustration, and that sometimes can play a role in how deep our depression is. So there's foods that match each of those tanks. So some of the dark green leafy vegetables are going to resonate more with your nervous system and with releasing and managing feelings of anger, frustration, and irritation. The other foods that serve the metal tank, sadness, grief, and loss, are foods that are generally white in color, like turnips, cauliflowers, rutabagas, and white potatoes. So by adding the dark green leafy vegetables and some of the white vegetables more into your diet, you might see that it empowers you to process feelings of depression. And along with depression, we may have anxiety, we may have fearfulness, we may have anger or rage. And so when we start to work with our energetic aspects of self through our foods, some of those other feelings that we experience through depression may also improve too. So what do you do with these foods? Well, over there at the Aiki Healing website, I have all kinds of recipes that are free for you to access. All you have to do is type in green leafy vegetable recipes or type in recipes for turnips, and you're going to see those recipes pop up. So that's one of the things that you can really be mindful of. You should have those dark green leafy vegetables at least 3 times a week. Same thing for the white cauliflower, turnips, white potatoes, or rutabagas. Now, if you are diabetic, you may need to really watch the white potatoes because they can raise your sugar, so you may want to stick with things more like cauliflower and turnips, which don't convert easily into high levels of glucose. So what is that one thing you heard me say during the objectives that we want to be mindful of? What is that one food that is really working against us as African Americans in terms of healing our depression? What is that one food? That one food is sugar. Oh, I know y'all hate to hear that, right? Let me explain why. When we have higher than usual or higher than what is considered healthy levels of glucose, we have what's called a high A1C. A1C is just a snapshot of your red blood cells and how much glucose, how much sugar molecules are on there. And so you're looking at 2 different blood cells. The one on the left where, whoops, I just lost it. There. The one on the left that has fewer blue dots is a person who has lower A1C or lower glucose levels, meaning there's a lot of space on that particular cell for oxygen to attach to. And I'm going to talk about oxygen and its role to depression in just a second. Now, the person who has the high sugar, the high A1C, they have so many blue molecules of sugar sitting on their red blood cells that there isn't a lot of space for oxygen. What is the correlation between low oxygen and depression? Well, we find when we don't have enough oxygen levels, our brains cannot appropriately utilize the chemicals and our neurotransmitters. So we tend to have imbalances on the biochemical level. That oxytocin that I talked about before tends to be lower in people that have high sugar. So that predisposes us to deeper moods of depression. Now, they did this study and they found depression occurrence is 2 to 3 times higher in people with diabetes. It's because of what I just talked about, that when you are diabetic and you have these high levels of sugar, this high level of A1C, it's disruptive to your brain hormones and chemistry that regulate mood. And that sad part about that is many people that are diabetic also suffer from depression, but their depression is usually underdiagnosed. So if you're someone that is diabetic, and I know that almost every single family member that I know on my African American side is either pre-diabetic or diabetic, and we have a higher incidence as African Americans of developing this. So if you or someone you love is suffering from diabetes, but you're also noticing that sense of that heaviness, that grayness, that mood that doesn't shift, that you're having difficulty with connecting with positive thoughts, it could be because you are still consuming too much sugar in your diet. And that really concerns me as a practitioner, because part of our culture, I know when I would go to Big Mama's house, she'd have the famous suck it to me cake or a pound cake. We often are expressing love through our baked goods. I have a very dear colleague, and I love to support other Black-owned businesses that produces baked goods. And in support of her business, I said, let me order from her. And I got these amazing cookies, and I want to be authentic and be able to give a review from having eaten the cookies. And I ate the cookies, and I rarely have additional sugars in my diet that's not just coming from fruits and vegetables, right? 3 days after eating those cookies, I could not shake that sense of that depressive fog falling over me. I could not shake it. And I said to myself, what in the world is happening here? And then I realized, it's the sugar. The sugar is messing with my biochemistry and my neurotransmitters. And so I just was super careful. I went paleo for about 2 weeks, took out even healthy grains, just really, really went low carb, and my mood sprang back. So think about that for a moment. If you're someone that's expressing your love for others in the community by baking, by creating jams, by creating sugary things, know that someone in the community may be suffering from depression, and you're actually giving them that one food that they really shouldn't have. And so I really encourage all of us to rethink sugar. And, I see so many people naturally, and I was there too, that when you're depressed, you want that sweet. You want to reach for those sugary things, those cookies, those ice creams, those things. It's natural. There's a part, an energetic piece of us that needs that little bit of sweet. So we need to learn how to have things that have that little bit of a sweet that don't spike our sugars so high. That would be things like smoothies that have some fruit, but then have some fats and proteins added to it so that our bodies just don't spike up when we have that. We call those glycemic friendly foods. When you're sticking to a higher diet with fresh fruits and vegetables, you tend not to crave so much of the white sugars and the pound cake, the sakatumis, the jams, and the jellies. So if there's one thing only to remember from this workshop, that it is so important to regulate your levels of sugar by controlling what's coming in through your diet. So let's get ready for that third incident. Let me take us out of screen share. So I was moving along in my life as a young person, finished UT, and I thought, okay, I will never have depression again because I know about energy pathways and I know how to begin to eat foods that will nourish me in these special ways. But when I was in my 30s, mid 30s, I went through a loss of a child. I was pregnant and I had a miscarriage, and my hormones went all over the place, as is natural, right? But for me, someone with a history of clinical depression, what happened is that it sent me into a really deep valley. But I had all these tools that I had learned as a teenager, that I had learned as a young adult. So I thought, okay, I'm on top of this. I see what's happening. I got my people in place. I got my psychotherapist, and I was studying psychotherapy at the time too. So I was really well positioned, and I had a team of holistic practitioners and acupuncturists and herbalists. It's like, I got this. And guess what? Those tools weren't working for me. They weren't shifting me out. This time, the level of hormonal shift that happened as a result of the miscarriage, along with the grief and loss associated with that, was so deep that those tools weren't working. Right? And there's this piece about depression that sometimes we find the tools and they're working and they bring us, and then we fall back in and they're not working again. Luckily, my acupuncturist, Dr. Haviland, told me about Dr. Arnold Tayam, who is the head Qigong instructor for Stanford Integrative Medicine. She says, have you ever done Qigong? Now, little did I know I had been learning that all along from my father, who was a martial artist. But I said, no, I don't even know what that is, She said, I think you would benefit to go and work with him and learn more about the energy pathways and learn more about energy tanks and learn really specific movement tools because, Kay, you need to move your body. I was always a thin person, but I wasn't moving enough. And that's something that is really common in our African American culture. There's studies that show that we are just not moving at the levels that we need to be healthy, right? And just because I was thin doesn't mean that I was fit, right? So I went to go study with Dr. Arnold Tayam, and I started learning these funny little things like these resets that I'm teaching you. And I started to notice bigger shift. And he's the one that turned me on to the idea and taught me that we have 5 energy tanks. And each of those tanks is associated with what? A different state of emotional and mental being. Each of those tanks has certain physical aspects that it controls. Each of those tanks can make a difference in whether or not we can connect in with our highest spiritual self. And I delved in and became immersed in his professional 3 years Chinese energy medicine training program. And I made that commitment to become a practitioner. And later, in 2003, formed Aiki Healing. And from that point on, I am 57 years old now. I always have to be mindful of where my mental self is. I have to be mindful to self-care. I have to be mindful to really make sure that I'm regulating those 5 tanks so that I don't fall back into depression. Since that time, I have never fallen back into depression. And every day, I have greater energy and a greater sense of being able to access mental clarity and emotional equilibrium. And I see that showing up in a greater capacity to expand my faith and my connectivity to my highest healing power. And so this job and journey has taken me on this mission to really help you all learn about those 5 energy tanks. Whether you're learning about 2 of them, like we worked on today, or whether you're entering into some of my programs to learn all 5, I want this information to be with all of you. So let's go on to the very last reset. So the last reset is going to require you to get on up out of that chair, or you can stay in your chair if you need to. And again, come and stand with your feet about shoulder width apart. And this one is going to start here. Again, scoot to the edge of your chair so your feet can be flat on the ground. And we're going to inhale with our hands palm down, and we're going to exhale with our hands palm up. And what this one does is begin to regulate, again, that metal energy tank, moving the energy of stuck grief, sorrow, and loss. So we're inhaling our courage and healing energy. We're exhaling out of any sadness, grief, or loss. Inhale that energy of courage and healing. Exhale feelings of sadness or loss. Inhale the energy of courage and healing. Exhale any sadness or loss. Inhale and exhale. 3 more. Inhale, feel that healing energy coming in. Exhale, releasing out the heavier energies of sadness, grief, or sorrow. Inhale. Exhale that heavy grayness. Last time. Inhale and exhale. Beautiful. Release down to the ground. Excellent. So let me know in the chat box how you experienced that reset. Now these are such simple resets that take a short amount of time. You can drop them in as you move through the day. And on the Aiki Healing Facebook page, the public page, you'll find a bunch of these resets if you go to the video section. And all you need to do is to set your timer, your watches, to say, hey, I need to take like a 5-minute reset every 2 or 3 hours. And you begin to learn to integrate them into your life as you're flowing, so the stress is not building up to a point where it's tipping you over and your depression is going deeper, right? If we can be proactive to regulate those 5 different energy tanks, but particularly that metal tank and particularly that wood tank, and regulate them before they get congested and stuck, we'll find that gradually our tools that we may be using from the Western side, our psychotherapy, our counseling, are going to be more effective. Many of my clients who were on drugs for depression and weren't really getting results began to see that those medications work better when you're integrating holistic strategies, until gradually they were not needing as high of dosages. And some were able to even get off of their medications. Remember that we have the best of both worlds. We have Western solutions and strategies that often need augmentation with things from the holistic side of things. So I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. Today, you learned about 3 different ways through movements to begin resetting your energy tanks and recalibrating the way your brain is working and how your feelings are moving. You learned about aromatherapy and the importance of lavender as a therapy to help with healing depressive moods. And you learned about foods in terms of which foods to eat, the green leafy vegetables and the white vegetables, and what food to avoid, sugar. I want to invite you into the Q&A at this point, and I'll see you over there. They have it all set up so that you can ask questions directly. And there's so many different portions of holistic strategies that I do in my practice that for time's sake I haven't been able to go in, but that's a good space for us to continue the dialogue. So relax and see you over there in the Q&A. Relax.
All right, we're live for the Q&A.
Good morning, everybody.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. An awesome information from Kay. One of the things that I got out of that is please stay away from sugar. Please stay away from sugar. Now let's start our Q&A session. We'll do our best to answer as many questions as possible. If you'd like to speak, you can raise your virtual hand and you will be unmuted so you can share. Remember to put any questions for your presenter in the Q&A. Now, help me welcome Kay for our first question. As I'm looking at these questions, Kay, one of the things that I see in the Q&A, they said wonderful, very relaxing.
Yay, that's great to hear. I'm glad you all enjoyed it.
Now let me go to the questions. How effective is lavender tea?
That's a great question. So, with any sort of plant material, in order for it to have a true medicinal quality, you actually have to cook it long. And so, what most people do is have that lavender tea bag and they just steep it for a couple of minutes. That's really not long enough to get the properties out. Like in Chinese medicine, we cook an herb for maybe an hour or so. So, you can get some benefits. It can be relaxing. The flavor and the aroma coming off of that tea is probably what's going to have more of an effect than the actual herbal constituents. So I definitely recommend it if you love it.
Awesome. Is there a safe sugar intake? Do sugar substitute have the same effect?
So there's a lot of research. I work really closely hand in hand with my colleagues from the Western side. And one of my favorite colleagues is Dr. Jonathan Scheinberg, who's a really well-known cardiologist. And we were discussing that about our clients using high levels of sugar substitutes. The problem with the sugar substitutes is it tricks the brain into thinking that sweet has come into the body. So our bodies release insulin. And so after a while, we become insulin resistant. So I always say cut back on the levels of sugar that you're having, but have the real deal. Don't get into all of those substitutes. And there's some studies that some of the synthetic sweeteners actually have a greater impact on reducing those feel-good chemicals that I talked about. So it can actually set us up for deeper levels of depression.
Another question. How important is eating organic foods?
Absolutely. I mean, that's part of what I talked about in my journey. I needed to really get rid of a lot of the toxins. And when we say organic, we're talking about foods that are grown without pesticides, meats that are grown without hormones, without antibiotics, without other types of chemicals coming in. That can play a really big role. But I also am so aware that organic tends to be more expensive. So it's not always an economical choice that we can make. So what we can do is to try to eat as much as possible fresh fruits and vegetables, wash them really thoroughly. Just by simply washing, you remove a lot of the toxins. And to try to keep your consumption of meats a little bit lower, because that's where a lot of the antibiotics and hormones are. So even if you're not able to get out there and buy organic because of cost, there's still some ways that you can detox the body.
That's good to know. That's really good to know. Are there any fragrances that you should avoid? I mean, do you recommend any particular essential oil brand?
I studied with Dr. Master Jeffrey Ewan, who was the pioneer in writing a book about using essential oils. And he used them internally. And this was way before the big companies that are out there. I won't mention who they are, but they know who they are. And he really looked for the distillations. It's the energetics of the distillation that makes a particular formula pure and effective. And though there are a number of really wonderful brands out there, there are many brands that are more affordable. So that's a lot of what I do is help guide my clients towards affordable essential oils, because not everyone can afford those big brands. And I don't want to like harp on the big brands, so I'm not saying the names, but I think you all know who I'm talking about. So there are alternatives to still getting high quality oils. I suggest that you pop over to my Aiki Healing exhibition booth and send me a note through there, or you can message me through the WUVA, and I'd be happy to kind of give you some ideas about brands that are affordable but really high quality.
And she did remind us that she has a booth. So if anybody is interested in learning a little bit more, just visit her booth. Is it helpful to use lavender during an anxiety attack? If so, how and where is the best area to put on your body?
Yay, that's a great question because at 11:45 at the live stream at the Aiki Healing booth, I'm having another workshop on holistically healing anxiety. That's a great question. Although lavender can be more targeted for depression, we can use that to help calm our nervous system down. But for anxiety, instead of using it under the right rib cage, you would use it on your solar plexus right in the center of your body, or you would put it directly over the spleen pancreas under the left side of your rib cage. So we just kind of slide the position of where we use that oil. And with anxiety, often that's a whole other element tank called the earth tank. Anxiety really responds well to things like nutmeg. So I would combine that lavender with a little bit of nutmeg or a little bit of patchouli or even just a tiny bit of cinnamon. Those kinds of oils are really effective for grounding you when you're having an anxiety attack.
There are so many questions. I can tell that this session has been very helpful. Um, do you recommend acupuncture to treat anxiety, complementing standard medicine?
Actually, acupuncture can be very helpful. In my practice, it's needle free. So I tend to lean more towards methods that are non invasive and that there are things that you can learn to do. So I use in my practice needle free methods, working with the energy points of the body, distance healing, and teaching clients how to do movements that actually duplicate what you get in an acupuncture session. That idea that if you have the tools to work with yourself, you're going to get greater results because you work with yourself every day versus trying to get into the clinic, once a week or twice a week. So I really highly recommend the needle-free methods.
Wow, I was thinking about getting acupuncture a while back, so that's helpful. That's helpful for me.
Absolutely.
I know. Um, and I want you to keep me on target because there's a whole lot of questions for Kay. You somewhat answered this before, but I am doing the keto diet.
Mhm.
And nowadays there are a lot of alternatives to things I love, like cookies and ice cream. Are these not recommended as replacement to the real thing?
Well, absolutely. We want to make sure that those alternatives, again, aren't filled with a lot of sugar substitutes that are tricking our bodies into producing that insulin and creating that circumstance of becoming insulin resistant. They did a lot of studies with animals looking at how they're processing things like NutraSweet, and they found that they used rats in this case, that the rats that were consuming products that were high in NutraSweet became diabetic. And so we have to really be concerned with what our brains, through the taste sensation of sweet, are triggering in terms of that insulin and that pancreatic response. So again, I say low carb. There's ways to go low carb and have a little bit of natural sweet. I don't think zero carb is sustainable for a long time. I do believe in doing that in short bursts, but I think the natural fruits and vegetables, which do have a little carb, are going to be a better alternative and more sustainable because I'm all about sustainable eating. We can do these kinds of diets and things for a short term, but we have to think about our longer term of life and create a way of eating that is natural that can help us keep the carbs low. I tend to eat a low carb diet myself, but I make sure that the carbs that I'm getting are not like the high sugary white carbs.
That's good to know. This question has to do with turmeric, and I've used turmeric before, so this is going to be helpful. Do you have to cook spices like turmeric in the same way you have to cook flowers to get the biochemical benefits?
Again, with any kind of herb and plant, when you cook it long, you're extracting the essence and that's going to have a stronger medicinal quality. Now, that's not to say that, say, like turmeric supplements, which tends to be powdery, are not helpful. But turmeric is that one that I always say to people, be very careful. It is a blood thinner. So if you're that person that's taking a small baby aspirin to prevent blood clots and to support healthy heart, or you are on blood thinners because maybe you've had a heart attack, heart surgery, or stroke, and you start taking turmeric, it amplifies the effect of other blood thinners. So as a master herbalist, I always tell people, please don't self-treat with that. Make sure that you check in with a trained herbalist instead of just using it from over the counter, because you might be setting yourself up for internal bleeding if you are taking other blood thinners and you take turmeric.
There are several questions that's part of the Q&A, and some of that information is provided through your information that you have put on your PowerPoint, and then also resources that you will have available that's based on the information that we already have. So we thank you for providing that resource for us, because now we can kind of go to that. And remember that she also have a booth that you can go to so that she can ask additional, or you can ask her additional questions. Um, oh, does it make a difference if we do it on the left side of the body? Remember the little taps that we were doing? Does it matter if we do it on the left side of her body? Is there a difference?
So with the energy points and meridians, they're bilateral. So all of these points exist on both sides of the body. So often when you see these resets, you'll see us working both sides of the body. Now, when it comes to essential oils, where we put it makes a difference. It depends on what we're targeting. I was talking about the liver. So we put that lavender right over the liver. We were working with the organs, so to speak. But whenever we're doing motions and movements and tapping in that type, we always want to try to get it on both sides of the body.
Yes, I enjoyed the tapping. I think that that was really helpful for me. I believe that is all of the questions, because it appears as though that most of the questions can be answered through, again, through your booth, and then also some of the information that you have already provided us. And so we thank everyone for participating in that Q&A. Again, I had seen a lot of the chat where they stated it was a wonderful information. It was helpful. It some of it was given helping with their energy because folks were kind of getting up and enjoying some of the activities that you were doing. I just want to make sure that everyone, again, we can't get to all of the questions, but I hope very much that you have enjoyed this session. Kay, before we get ready to leave, are there any other comments, last minute comments?
Absolutely. So I do invite you to the Aiki Healing exhibition booth every day from 11:45 to 12:45. I'm teaching a live stream. We're focusing on healing anxiety, and I'll be around to answer questions. There'll also throughout the day be some other activities. We'll be looking at healing cancer with Qigong. We'll be looking at healing fatigue with Qigong. We'll be interviewing other business owners that are using positive mindsets to create prosperity. So the schedule for all of those events are in the Aiki Healing exhibition. The PowerPoint for the anxiety one has already been put there. And by the time you get over there by 11:45, the PowerPoint for this presentation will also be there too. And you can also look under the usual WUVA for this event, and you should be able to find the PowerPoint, but I'll make sure that it's in the booth because I saw many of you asking about it.
Hey, and
Thank you
Sonia,
so
there
much.
was one question that came
Oh,
in about lavender for children and teenagers who may be experiencing anxiety.
Definitely. So lavender is one of the tools that's gentle and used in sparing amounts. It can be useful for children even under the age of 10. Oftentimes with children and teens, we want to combine the use of lavender, as I suggested, with some movement. That combination works really well, especially when we're talking about mood disorders, we're talking about perhaps some behavioral challenges that we might be seeing that need to be regulated, that combining that lavender with movements and having those dialogues around what's going on at a feeling level and giving them that outlet can be even more useful.
Are there additional questions, Anne?
Not that I've seen that haven't been answered.
Okay. Okay. Again, thank you, Kay, for sharing your knowledge and insight with us. And many thanks to you, everyone, for joining us today. Again, we hope that you enjoy this 21st Central Texas African American Family Support Conference. Again, you are all through the nation, and that, in a sense, is a true blessing. And we are so grateful that we're able to do some virtual hugs and virtual kisses. Now, please take a moment to complete your workshop survey. It helps us to know how that we're doing for our conferences. If you're seeking CEUs, remember that your form will be in the survey and the links are in the chat. Thank you again, and everyone stay safe.
Okay, I was kidding. One question just came in.
Oh,
Okay.
Sorry to ask it again, but what can I use as a sugar substitute?
what can be used as a sugar substitute? So again, I recommend using the real deal, but smaller. So what are healthier sources of sweet other than just white sugar? You can use small amounts of honey. You can use small amounts of agave, which is has a lower glycemic. So some of these sugars will digest more slowly, so are healthier for you. You can also use things that are made from sweet potato. There are a number of different sweetener products that are made from sweet potatoes and yams. Let's see, what else? There's also vegetable glycerin, which has a naturally sweet taste. It's extremely low carbohydrate, so it doesn't give your brain that boost like, ooh, a lot of sugar just came in. And it's not so terribly sweet that it tricks your body to saying, oh, wow, it tastes so sweet, I have to release insulin. So those are the things that I would recommend. Again, the natural things, but in smaller amounts.
Okay, thanks again, Kay. And again, I hope that everyone will enjoy this conference. I know you will be blessed by it and continue just to enjoy it. Sit back and relax. Please stay safe and take care of yourself. Thank you.